come from a long line of psychics, and I must have been about 7 when, during an afternoon nap, I woke up after a very frightening dream. At the time, we were living in Mount Butler in Hong Kong Island, and Mom's family lived in Capiz in the Philippines. I ran out of my bedroom into a room full of family and friends to tell my mom about it. I saw this Filipino man in a wooden box, dressed in a cream shirt and brown trousers, and lots of our family were around him crying. As a young child, I'd never seen a dead person before and was distraught at the experience. My family consoled me and told me not to worry, but it brought to their attention that I too had the gift. It was only a few years later that I was told that the person I saw was my uncle, who had been shot by the local militia in my mom's village in the Philippines, and it surmises that the clothes I saw him in were the clothes he was buried in. So it turns out that I had a psychic snapshot of the actual Filipino funeral rites, whereby the body is kept in the family house for a period of weeks so grieving people can pay their respects to him. This brother of my mom's, she had been having prophetic dreams around the time, warning him to leave town because something bad was going to happen to him. He didn't believe her and was shot by the local militia after a dispute. It is Filipino superstition that during this period that the body was stored in the family house, the spirit visits the family on the 3rd, 5th, and 7th day after their death. This, as it turns out, was during this time that we both had these visitations. Mom was in the kitchen washing dishes when she heard who she thought was Daddy coming back from work. That's when she saw a man from the corner of her eye, standing in the doorway, wearing a light shirt and brown trousers. So she chatted to Daddy for about 5 minutes about his day and what he had been up to, when it occurred to her that he didn't answer her back once. She turned around to ask him a question, and then she realized that there was no one in the doorway at all. It was at this point she was a little bit spooked, as she remembered my description of Uncle Fred in his coffin, and hurriedly went to check on Daddy. He had come in when she had heard him come in, but had just fallen asleep on the bed, fully clothed, in knit-wearing brown trousers and a light shirt. So it was her brother's way of saying goodbye, and I guess to say sorry for not having listened to her when she warned him. A few years later, it was 1987, around about the time that Edward Yule, Hong Kong's governor at the time, passed away. We were still living in the same flat in Mount Butler, but my sister and I had moved from the room we were in, as that had been converted into Mom's nursery, where she looked after preschool children during the daytime. We were now in the room where I would have my bedroom until we moved over to the new territories. I must have been about 9, so my sister would have been 4. We shared a bunk bed, and her being smaller stayed on the lower bunk. I awoke to pitch black and the sound of flip-flops walking up and down our corridor. I thought, this is strange, as it is custom to remove your shoes at the front door and to wear slippers around the house. As I heard these flip-flops getting closer and closer to my door, sheer terror took over. I whispered to my sister, "Chris, can you hear that?" No one answered back, so I was trapped on the top bunk with nowhere to go, with this noise coming closer and closer. I hid my head under my blanket, like most kids do, wishing it to go away. I said this time, more incessantly, "Chris, can you hear that?" And something hissed back at me, "Yes." That did not sound like my sister at all. At this point, I was terrified. I tried to gather all my strength to get out of the bed, but I was too scared. After what felt like a millennia, I eventually gathered enough courage to jump off the top of my bed, ensuring by no means that I touched the lower bunk and charged into my parents' room across the corridor from our room. I was so embarrassed being so old and being scared, I didn't actually get into their bed, but spent the rest of the night curled up in a ball at the foot of their bed. It turns out that my sister wasn't in our room at all that night. My question was, what was that in the corridor and in the bunk bed with me? The strange pink light. Around this time of the strange occurrences with the flip-flops, we were still living in flats in Mount Butler. My daddy, a complete atheist, had an experience of his own. Daddy does not believe in the supernatural, and if God actually spoke to him, he still wouldn't believe it. He was lying in bed one night when he woke up for no reason to this pink sphere to appear on the wall opposite their bed. It seemed to come out of the wall and sit there and go back into the wall again. He was puzzled by this and went to investigate. He checked out where the possible light source could be coming from. The curtains. No, we were on 3rd floor, so it couldn't have been vehicle lights. He went into the bathroom. All lights were off and couldn't have come from there either. He got back into bed and tried to wake Mom up to show her. She was having none of it and kept her head under the sheets. Well, the sphere appeared again and came out of the wall, suspended somehow, then sunk back in and disappeared. He never did figure out what that was or where it came from. Running ghost. When he was working in the Royal Hong Kong Police, he had another experience. At this point, he was the superintendent and managed a section of the traffic police. They were doing their rounds when a speed camera on the road flashed for no reason. They went to investigate, and it flashed again with no cars in the near vicinity. They thought nothing more of it until the pictures were developed, and on one of the photos, there is a distinct picture of a person, blurred, apparently running very fast. So fast, it set off a speed camera. The ghost dog. When we were living in Mount Butler, I had one other experience that reaffirmed my belief in the supernatural, and 2 other people I was with experienced it also. I must have been about 14 when my sister and my best friend at the time decided to go for a walk in the countryside. So where we lived was surrounded by Hong Kong countryside, which was perfect for me as I was a tomboy and spent as much of my time as possible out and about, exploring and climbing trees. Just before I started university in the UK, I was visiting some friends in Cardiff. I was feeling very odd that night, and as we were heading out into town, a premonition hit me. I turned around to my friend and said, "Something very big is going to happen tonight." He just looked at me like I was stark raving mad, so I dropped it. So when we went out and had a lark and came back, thinking nothing more of it, imagine our surprise when we woke up in the morning and splashed all over the news was coverage on Diana's death. This, of course, being the famous Princess Diana of Wales, who died tragically in a car accident. But I predicted it the day before. At least I feel like I did. Could be a coincidence, but I don't think so. Udalexer Cemetery experience. So, I started uni in Derby in the Midlands, and where I was living was student digs on Ulexer New Road. I was heavily into my goth influence back then, not so much now, but I still love old cemeteries and dramatic clothing. There was this beautiful one on our road that I used to visit regularly and read and draw, with many beautiful statues and old gravestones. One day, my ex-boyfriend and I went to visit it, as it was a lovely day turning to evening. So I wandered around looking at all the gravestones and the statues, trying to find the oldest tombstone we could find. It must have been coming up to winter time as the sun set quickly, and we realized in a panic that the gate had been closed, so we were locked in, and had to find another way out. So we walked along the perimeter, looking for a likely tree to help us over the wall, when the sun just disappeared, and we were pitched into almost complete darkness. Then, for no reason at all, the mist appeared over the headstones, so it was hard to avoid the graves themselves. So it suddenly looked just like a horror movie set, trying to avoid broken tombstones and holes in graves and that danged mist in the dark. By this point, I was pretty panicked, frantically trying to get out, with this feeling of overwhelming dread descending over me, and all cells in my body telling me to leave right now. We eventually scrambled over a wall into the student bar, and that feeling just lifted, just like that. It's only a few months ago that I was looking online about ghosts in Derby that I found out that very cemetery is haunted. Brilliant. My dreams. I thought that was the end of my experiences, but looking at the dreams section, I've remembered some more I want to share with you. I've always had very vivid dreams, some not necessarily all coming true, but all seem to have symbolic importance in the coming days, weeks, or even sometimes years. I more often than not have deja vu experiences, even if I haven't ever A, done this before, or B, seen places or people before, or C, really ever thought about these things when I am conscious. I haven't really wanted to tell people about them, as most people. I worry that most people think I'm quite mad. Haunted house. So this also happened just before I finished university in Derby, I think. It was just before my ex-boyfriend and I broke up. The importance of this dream is one that I've been able to break it down and understand it in its composite parts. So both of us were walking around this dark woods, and I was taking all that I had learned from watching horror movies into mind, and was very careful of not wandering off on my own. Made sure I had a weapon in hand in case anything happened. We eventually came to this clearing where this ominous house stood at the end of this garden. However, I needed the bathroom, and even though we knew it was a haunted house, I was not one of those people who would go to the loo in a haunted forest. So we walked in, and there were people there. Thankfully, none looking like psychopaths or zombies. Strangely enough, they were people we knew too. There was a feeling of dreaded sadness throughout the house though, and I refused to go anywhere by myself. We are directed to the bathroom, which was at the end of this corridor. he decided to sit and chat with people whilst I did my business. So, I started walking, but the corridor was like the one from the poltergeist. It just kept getting further and further away, until I had to break into a run, desperately needing to go and leave this house as soon as possible. I eventually made it and threw the door open and did what I needed to do. Then I woke up and realized that I still needed to go, so I ran for the loo. Luckily, I had the foresight to write this dream down once I had gotten back to bed and knew that we were doomed. The haunted house was a reflection of our relationship, being hounded by our mutual bad doings, and that the end was near. It was just a matter of time, and so it was. Finally, before I finish another of my epic storytelling sessions, I have one more prophetic experience to share with you, but not one from my dreams. It has to do with my pet dog, Sophie. Her name was Sophie. She was lovely, with her white and black patch over her eye and black patch in her back. She was only 6 months older than me and had been with her family for 16 years. She was the loveliest, sweetest dog in the world, apart from having a penchant for biting socks, eating tissues and rubber bands, and attacking the Hoover. She was suffering from basically her insides giving in. She had serious kidney problems, and she couldn't walk very well because of arthritis in her back legs. And because she couldn't help herself anymore, she was kept outside. So one evening, when her parents were out, my sister and I were playing with her in the garden, and I had this weird feeling come over me. I seemed to be able to predict death, unfortunately, amongst other things. I turned to my sister when I saw this shadow fall on her Sophie that looked like a cross. It was like it was a sign saying she was going to die tomorrow. So that's what I told my sister, and she kind of brushed it off. She didn't believe me, being much younger than me, but sure enough, after a hard day at school, I was only 14 or so at the time, we came back and our parents were in pieces, and that's when I knew it had happened. They had to take her down to the vet and have her put down, as it was too cruel to keep her suffering like that. I've never seen my daddy in pieces like that, but because I was strengthened by my foreknowledge, I supported him in his time of need. My poor cat was distraught, as she basically brought him up from when we adopted him as a very small kitten. On a happier note, I had a dream after this terrible day. I was watching my crazy dog run from the front of the house, in and up the stairs, with much zest and energy, like she would have had as a younger dog, running up to our level of the house, looking like she was having the time of her life, back and forth, giving little yips of happiness, grinning in her quintessentially silly Sophie way. As because of her health problems and her incontinence, she was not allowed in except for very cold weather. I think this was her way of saying that she was free and happy at last, and I knew she was in peace. She still does come and visit us occasionally when we walk by the front of the house, and you can, still after all these years, smell her, and we know she's still looking out for us. I keep meaning to write a dream diary. I'll do that this year, as these dreams seem to be too important to miss. My husband and myself and my brother were all watching our mother's house while she was out of town on vacation. We had been there for a few days, and all happened to be on this particular evening and night. Well, we had finished dinner, and we were all just hanging out in the living room watching TV. My brother said he was just going to sleep on the couch, and my husband and I said goodnight and went to bed in my mother's bedroom because that's where we had been sleeping. We kissed goodnight like usual and turned off the bedside lamp. I myself just can't close my eyes and go right off to sleep, so I was just laying there, looking off into the darkness and trying to wind down. Suddenly, I noticed a very dark black mass right by the bedroom door. I blinked my eyes a few times, trying to make them adjust to the dark better, but realized they already had, because I could make out the mass that was so much darker than the dark. I began to feel afraid when I saw it moving. I laid there and watched it approach the bed over our bodies. It looked larger than it had by the door. I began to nudge my husband, but I decided to lay there a little bit longer to see if it continued to move or even get larger. I laid there and marveled at its darkness and its extremely dark color as opposed to the regular darkness. It was pitch black and just floated there above us. Unbelievably, I fell asleep. The next day at lunch, my brother said, "Hey, last night I saw the weirdest thing when I was trying to fall asleep. A large black mass was hovering above my head and scared me half to death." I stuck my hand in it, and it was freezing cold. Before I had a chance to speak, my husband said, "Me too. I thought I was seeing things." I spoke up, and I said I saw it as well, and was frightened by it. They both said, "Wow, I wonder what it was." I had read somewhere that these could possibly be evil. Needless to say, we didn't spend the night there again. Hey Phantoms, so first of all, I wanted to thank you guys again for tuning into this YouTube video and actually watching it to your heart's content. I really appreciate all the viewership, the subscribership, and everything that actually doesn't make sense that I say, because, I don't know, we gotta embrace everything, right? Anyway guys, thank you so much for tuning in again. I see a lot more new faces, which I'm very proud of, and I don't even know why I said very proud of, but if you guys are used to my outros, or if you're not, I guess you gotta get used to them now, because that's how they are. But anyway guys, please share this video. It would mean a lot to me, and it really helps the algorithm to grow and blossom into something special for the channel, I guess. And yeah, that's it. I'm gonna go, guys, because that sounds so weird, but let me know in the comment section below which story you liked, and give this video a big fat thumbs up. Okay, bye-bye. I'm leaving now, because I'm Phantom not know things. Okay. Cringe.